Hi, this is Doug Vogt again from the Diehold Foundation. And this is where we start getting to the meat and potatoes, how the universe really works, the foundations, how matter comes into this dimension. I define 8 different dimensions. This video will cover the first 4. How the atom is created into this dimension, what is time, the first 4 dimensions, describing the carrier wave and how it manifests itself in our reality, why the natural log e to the x appears in our reality. That's actually quite important. There's 2 formulas that express it, but no one philosophically has ever understood or said why it shows up. And of course, I do. Okay, I'm teaching from this book, Theory of Multidimensional Reality, chapters 2 and 3. Okay, the theory basically, like I showed in one of the earlier, this is the basic graph of how the matter world and us come into existence. This graph shows the matter world, the information world, and time. The Diehold, anyway, when you say something is part of a synchronous system, you're saying it's part of a computer. I call this computer the Diehold, D-I-E-H-O-L-D, spell it right. And it's a special kind of computer, obviously. It's some kind of quantum computer, but it creates reality. The y-axis is the information dimension. That's the carrier wave that holds the information that creates the matter world and also us. But I'll explain later, there's multiple carrier waves. We're just dealing right now with matter. So, obviously, matter, each one of the elements is made up of really thousands of frequencies, not just a few. In some cases, we only recorded a few, but there's really thousands for each one of them. And that's what's strapped onto these carrier waves. And I'll go into it a little later. The atom is created 90 degrees out of phase from the information dimension. So as it crosses the x-axis, it bursts out the information and creates the matter world. And that's what I said. When I saw this, I said, gee, that reminds me of Planck's constant, which is a finite piece of energy. And I said, gee, it sounds like that's really what it is. So what it turns out, like this could be a proton, that's a neutron, or neutron proton. It doesn't really matter. It's the same thing, just 180 degrees out of phase from itself. Anyway, it's like Planck's constant, but not exactly. This is Planck's constant. Is 6.626, goes on for a long time, times 10 to the minus 34 in joules per second. A very, very small piece of energy. This is Planck's equation, sometimes known as Planck's Einstein equation. Energy is equal, h is Planck's constant, times frequency equals Planck's constant times the speed of light divided by wavelength. Now, in this case, the carrier wave has a lot of wavelengths, a lot of frequencies in it, even though it itself can be expressed as a frequency. This is, okay, what is time? Okay, this is Planck's time. 5.39 times 10 to the minus 44 seconds. It's never been really tested to be proven. It's such a small amount of time. For our discussion, we'll assume it's a complete cycle, measured from there to there or from here to here. So not a half a cycle, but a complete cycle. That's what I'm referring to. So we're going to assume this is Planck's time, 5.39 times 10 to the minus 44 seconds. Now, you can also see what time is. With all the dimensions, I can tell you what time is in one sentence. I don't have to write a whole book. Time is the rate at which the Diehold transmits our information. That's it. Okay, imagine an atom is burst out, it becomes an atom in this dimension. So let's say it's a big round ball, and it's really a bunch of information, frequencies, but across the x-axis, this information, the second dimension, becomes the atom. If you were to put a dot on that ball and trace it as it goes through the process, it would go like this, and then it would flip up. This is where it crosses the x-axis, and flip and go over there. Here, if it's going in a tight little circle in a round path, tracing out a toroid. This line here represents that carrier wave, that carrier wave modified by e to the x, the natural log. And I'll explain why. It's a delay in propagation. I'll explain why it shows up on our reality. By the way, 22 views of this waveform makes the Hebrew alphabet. I don't want the scientists to say, well, he's saying that Moses is a extremely highly advanced people, or they came from a highly advanced society. No, not at all. He was a late Bronze Age man. What is true is that Abraham stumbled on a cave that had the repository of an extremely highly advanced technology. Moses says that on the two tablets, the writing on the two tablets says it was the writing of God and the words of God. In other words, he didn't design the letters, and he didn't create the sequence of letters on the two tablets. That's the difference. So it's kind of amazing. When I get, I'm going to cover that in video 2A, is when I'm going to be doing the Hebrew alphabet, because it's really physics. This is actually pictures of an atom. These are the electron shells here, as you can see here, and there's the center of it. What I envision is really like a center modulation point where all this information is aimed in a certain point in time and space, and that's it. It's kind of a foggy thing, but this actually shows atoms on a carbon film. And here's the atoms, and between the shots that he took, the atoms are actually moving. These are larger atoms on a film of carbon. Here's another one. Here's a large atom on a carbon film. And this is done by an electron microscope. And you can see it's moving around. It's tracing out a little toroid. Now, the toroid is going to be pretty big because the electron microscope has at least 20,000 volts. It's imparting to the atom as well as the carbon film. You can see closer, even the carbon atoms are all moving. So, I mean, I'll go back to the toroid. This, as the energy level of the atom increases, I think this toroid gets larger and larger. In other words, the hole in the middle gets larger and larger. At some point, it has so much energy, the dihole can't transmit it to the same point in time and space, and it disappears. If you did it kinetically by banging a lot of U-238 or U-235 together, you'll get, it'll disappear, yes, but the dihole will rush whatever's energy or information is necessary to fill up a tear in the universe. It won't permit a tear in this creation. Defining the different dimensions. My theory of existence has 8 dimensions. I'm going to go through all of them, at least 4 of them on this tape, on this video. In string theory, well, Einstein has 3 plus time. As I said, you'll see later, time is not really a separate dimension in the theory of multidimensional reality because it involves all the dimensions. So therefore, it's part of the dihole, it's not another dimension. So in string theory, it's either 10 or 13. I think M theory is or was 13 dimensions, which none of this is testable at all. String theory is almost like a religion. But I'm told in the Hebrew alphabet stuff, looks like the philosophy that the string theorists were looking for. So maybe if you're a string theorist, don't forget to watch video series 2. Anyway, The first dimension, I'll get over here. First dimension is the information that's in the Diehold in the form of data. The second dimension is the transmission dimension, as you saw that modified square wave. The third dimension is of inanimate matter, the atoms, all of them. The fourth dimension is living things, from microbes, bacteria, insects, and man. Here's a for instance of inanimate objects, two of them. This is a carbon crystal. Please note is an octahedron. And it's a diamond, this one. And this is a gold crystal. It's forming an octahedron. And this is also matter, but she's a living thing, just like you and me and even the bugs. Now, I can see there's a major difference between inanimate objects and a living thing. So tell me why the great physicists don't see the difference. And they say and realize that that's a lot different from inanimate dead objects. This perceives its existence. Of course, it wants that on its finger, and it wants lots of that to pay for the clothing. That's her wedding dress, by the way. I put a girl in here because I know many of you are either computer nerds or physics nerds, and that'll get your attention, as it did mine. But the point I'm making here is there's such an obvious difference between a living thing that has matter, that controls it, and an inanimate object. And I think the reason they never tackle that is because they can't quantify and understand consciousness. Now I'm going to prove that there's two signals going on here, two carrier waves, one that represents, in this case, us, a fourth dimensional being, and one that represents the matter world. You'll see it. But this is Karelian photography. Sometimes they call it Kirilian photography. It's basically simple. An RF source, we used to use a flyback transformer and a RF source, such as a function generator, and two copper plates, a dielectric. You put a leaf in between, and you put a piece of film in, black and white or color, and connect it to ground, and you pulse this thing once, usually. And if you hit the right frequency, and that's the key, about 3 to 5% of the time you'll wind up with that. This is the phantom leaf. I have a bunch of examples of this. I'll get on this side here. Here, the physical leaf is there, and you see the bubbles of light and a corona around here. There's no matter here. But gee, you see the internal bubbles of light, and you see the outline of it. So you have light coming from no matter. You got that? Now, the next video, 1E in this series, will be on light. So I'll bring up this subject again. Here's another one. This was done by a scientist in Brazil, an institute there who I know. And cut up the top of this leaf, and this is the phantom. Beautiful phantom. Working with color is very tough. You have to do this within 2 to 3, tops 4 seconds, and then the Diehold corrects itself. It corrects it on the matter part immediately, but it takes time for the consciousness to do the correction, that something's missing. Here's two more. This is kind of interesting. This guy really whacked away at this thing, cut a hole in the middle, on the edge, and on the top. Now, he probably did these two first, and this was the last, because that was the easiest one to do. And so here's the result. The fan didn't show up here, but it did show up here. Probably because the Diehold corrected the transmission here, but didn't do it yet here. That's important to understand why. Here's another one. The physical leaf is here. This is the cut mark. You can see the outline of the thing. Interesting? Here's another one. This is the leaf, the part he cut off, but you could clearly see almost the whole thing is there, the outline and the superstructure on the inside. And here he put the leaf over the picture, And this is the priority cutoff, and you can see that you have light coming from no matter. I want to emphasize that so you understand, what they say light is, it's wrong. Anyway, here you see it. Now, the only way this could be is that you have two different kinds of information. One that makes up the physical matter of the leaf, and another one that makes up the conscious part of this leaf, or us, or anything. And it just takes a little bit of time for the Diehold to correct itself, and then this phantom would disappear, like it did in that other picture. This phantom leaf effect alone, which you could do with less than $100 worth of parts. You don't have to go off to ask for a grant from the federal government to do a paper to make up your missing two months of salary. You don't. You could do this with a couple $100 worth of parts, and you can prove this thing. You'll need a frequency counter also. Anyway, so that's definitive proof that you've got two signals. Not one, you've got two signals. It takes time for the second one, the consciousness part, to catch up. Okay, the carrier wave and how I discovered it. Back in the early 70s, there was I wouldn't say it's a fad, but people were working on pyramids and pyramid power and stuff like that. And I read about it, and a friend of mine, I met a guy, became a friend, Bill Kirilian, Kathy Goggin. They wrote a book called The Guide to Pyramid Energy. And he was in Santa Monica. I was also in West LA. And by the way, I also, to explain this best, I played violin for 9 years. Einstein also played violin too. I think it helps the left-right brain communication issue. Anyway, the most difficult phenomena in the universe is why a pyramid based on a certain slope. Now, in the old days, we thought it was based on pi, 51 degrees, 51 minutes, 14.5 seconds. When my friend Gary and I discovered that formula 1 over the square root of E gives you the arc cos of 52.66 degrees, it's about a degree different, but that's the real correct angle. So I want people to understand that. So why should a shape have any kind of an effect on something you put inside of it? But it does. Like Bill Hatch, Brian Shrimp living, they usually live about 4 or 6 weeks. He had them living over a half a year. And other phenomena like plants grow better and things like that. Some of you may have heard of this in the past. It's true. So why does it work? That's, by the way, the hardest phenomena in the universe to figure out. And it was actually the first one I figured out. And this is how it happened. When I played violin, the tuning fork came to me. The A tuning fork, you hit it, and you can get the A string on the violin to vibrate if you hit the tuning fork, if it's tuned right. So anyway, I said maybe the carrier wave, the three-dimensional representation of the carrier wave is the reason why it's, when you put things into it, it works, because it basically is amplifying the information that makes up the object. Now I could tell you firsthand, it does have effects on humans. When I slept under one, I had multiple color dreams at night, and I can't say my wife, and she doesn't like me to say this, but she had a 28-day cycle, 29 days. It went to 45 days. Needless to say, the pyramid came down. But it does have an effect. Anyway, I jump ahead. About 79, living in Seattle, my friend Gary and I discovered this formula. We discovered it on an HP 25. We didn't need a big computer for this thing. And it came up with, this is the arc cos, 52.6609 degrees. And it incorporates the inverse square law and the natural log. Natural log is 2.7182. It goes on for infinity. Anyway, it's the arccos. This is what the arccos means. Here's the angle, 52.66 degrees. The reciprocal is 37.34 degrees. This is really a vector of the carrier wave looking at the modulation point where the atom is directed. 90 degrees out of phase from this vector is how our matter world is created. You got that? That's our matter world. This is the information, the carrier wave, that makes up our matter world. Gee, how do you like that? That's the Great Pyramid here. This pyramid, if you take the physical dimensions of this thing, it comes up to 52.606 degrees. I'm only off by 5.4 hundredths of a degree. It's only because we don't know how big the capstone was and how thick the marble was on the outside limestone. Now, here's a better picture. Ask yourself, why would they build this? To bury a pharaoh? Forget it, it wasn't a pharaoh. The Egyptian legend of the pyramid is that a king had a dream that the world was going to be destroyed, and he built this to put all of man's known knowledge in it. Sound familiar? The reason why this thing is built, and it's built on that formula, is it's expressing a philosophy of the universe. That's what it's doing. Okay, now we get into the electronics part of how this information goes from the first dimension, transmission, and bursts out and becomes matter. Now, I'm using analogies of our current day inventions because we're a reflection of the universe that we're part of, therefore our inventions are a reflection of the universe that they are part of. You could use them for analogies, and I'm using it as an analogy. Remember, the people who created the alphabet and did this stuff was literally tens of millions of years more advanced than us, and I'm not exaggerating. Moses actually gives the clues for them. You'll see what I mean. Anyway, this is what cable companies use. It's called frequency division multiplexing. You have a whole bunch of digital information, or it could be light. It's combined and created into a carrier wave. It goes across the fiber. And at the other side, a box breaks it apart, demodulates it, and it recreates your TV, your internet, and your telephone, and anything else I want to put on there. Oh, by the way, I don't want to forget, I put this here, I think, mostly for I don't forget. The atom is created, think like a hologram, and 360 degrees all around it. So if you imagine all around 360 degrees, this information is directed to a point, a modulation point in time and space, and the atom is created. So again, what it's telling us is when it crosses the x-axis, the information bursts open and creates the atom. Our problem in our society, we don't have a math that deals with this. Tangential numbers, numbers that go to infinity or go to zero. It's really telling us it's going to another dimension. And that's our problem here. It comes in as a ball, and if it has any kind of an energy level, it will start doing this in counterclockwise and traces out a toroid. Most physicists can really, and quantum mechanics people can really relate to the toroid shape. I know that. Okay, so what I'm saying, what the theory says, is that each side, each dimension is represented by a slope angle of a carrier wave. Of 52.66 degrees is the slope angle in this dimension. So the first dimension doesn't really have a carrier wave, it's information in the Diehold. The second is that carrier wave, the third, it becomes matter, and the fourth is a living thing, person, fourth dimensional being. Now, it reminded me of something called Quadrature phase shift keying. It's a big word. Some electrical engineers know what it is. If you are in the cable business or transmission business, you do know what it is. This is kind of what they do. Data bits, a bit stream of binary bits, and they take the 0 bit here and the 1 bit there, odd and even, and they have 2 tracks, 1 channel, 2 channel, a Q channel. And this is how it's represented as 1 channel and a Q channel. Then they combine it, but the result is that they can split out 4 signals. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, but notice, imagine these are the sides of that pyramid. It's phasing of the carrier wave. Now, this is just a weak analogy. The people who are millions of years ahead of us may have some variation on this that's vastly superior to this, but it's just an analogy. But I picked this up and I said, I'll put it in there so some electrical engineers or computer scientists, especially those who are dealing with quantum computers, it might help them. Okay, then we get to the natural log and why it shows up in our reality. Planck's constant again, 3.39 times 10 to the minus 44 seconds. This is awfully short. Our computers, some of them go at 2.6 gigahertz, some are 1 gigahertz. Remember the old ones that were 100 megahertz? I do. I used to have one, and I'm sure some of you did too. Well, we don't perceive reality that fast. We can't. So we have a device in our computers. This is a very highfalutin video card. It's got a cooling system. It's got multiple CPUs, a lot of RAM memory. It basically takes the information from the computer, the CPU, and RAM memory. The drawings you see, like on a video game, is really an engineering drawing, a DXF file. And it takes all this information and it puts a shading on it, it puts a covering on the wireframe, shading, colors, mixes voice with it, motion, stuff like that, and to make a reality. And some of the realities recently are very good. So this is the kind of a device in it. So in our computers, we have something like this. We've had video cards for a long time. It's basically the speed at which we can perceive reality. It may generate something at was it 72 hertz or 96 hertz, or the expensive TVs, it's 120 or 240 hertz. And that's the reality we see on the screen. Like this one, I think is 240 hertz. The natural log e to the x, which shows you I don't have much of a life, or didn't when I was younger. I took the 98 or 99 of the natural elements, and I graphed their isotopes, both up to 1 to 5 to 6 atomic weights less or more than its normal, and I graphed it. Except 2 of them really threw the thing off. It's almost like we're dealing with another element. Like 23 or 25% of it was another weight. It's another story. Anyway, this is an exponential curve, an e to the x curve, that type of thing, except for that. And it shows up everywhere. This is the important part. How does, like in transmitters, television transmitters, radio transmitters, how does the transmitter know that the majority of the information it's transmitting is correct? Well, inside it, there's a circuit called a error detection circuit. So if a frequency rises too high, it changes it, or if it goes too low, it'll change it by either resistance or capacitance. So the majority of the signal is transmitted on frequency. That video card, or the function in the diode that acts like it, is where this delay in propagation is happening. Between the speed of the Diehold itself and the thing that creates our reality that's in the Diehold, there's a delay. That delay is the natural log. At least that's what I believe. This error factor, no, the other point is this. Without the error, the Diehold doesn't know that the majority of the information it's created is correct. So you have to have the error. Like, isotopes are error. This is error in the universe. The question is why does it exist? And I think the reason why it exists is because it helps the system know that the majority is transmitted correctly. By the way, this is the same percentage of childbirths. It's the same program. That's the end of this section. Again, Diehold Foundation is a 501c3, and we do accept foundation funds and donations. What we want to do is collect the samples of the glass beads to know what's already in the ground and sediments. We may be able to figure out what side of the Earth is facing when the sun does nova, and what side of the Earth is facing when this dust shell hits us 17 or 18 hours later. I hope you enjoyed the video. Part 2 will be on dimensions 5 through 8. Thank you for watching.